Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank everyone who has joined here today. My name is Donna Hook. My husband, Kenneth Hook, and I run the Hook Up with Real Estate call. We are a monthly meeting, the fourth Wednesday of every month, so the next one will be on May 24th. We're very excited tonight to have a special guest, Alan Foster. He started in real estate in 1991 as a real estate agent. He worked as a sales rep and sales manager for new home builders from 1995 to 2010. He's seen 3 booms and 2 real estate busts. He flipped homes in Maryland up to and during the 2008 financial crisis. He holds 2 degrees from the University of Maryland, one in accounting and the other in finance. And he's currently studying economics. And as an FYI, our daughter has a master's in financial economics. So
good for her. That'll serve her well in the future.
Yeah. He's currently pursuing flipping properties in Savannah, Georgia, and buying and rehabbing and holding small multifamily properties there as well. He just started operations to do the same in DFW area of Texas. So I guess that's Dallas-Fort Worth.
It is.
Okay.
That's where I got caught up with the AI bot.
Okay. And his role with the company is underwriting and compiling potential properties.
Comping.
Comping potential properties to either flip or hold. He's also an options trader and stock trader specializing in valuing companies on the New York Stock Exchange, which skills he uses to apply in the real estate industry. So I'm very excited that Alan's going to share a bit about his flipping experience and kind of relate it to multifamily. So things like finding a deal and risk capital and asset management, raising capital, balance sheet guarantor. So take it away, Alan.
Well, sure. Flipping houses is where I started. It's I did that basically because back in the day it was a little easier. There weren't so many flippers back then. Nowadays, for every flipper back then, there's probably 10 or 20 flippers today. So it was kind of easy to get started. Back then, a lot of things did exist that do today, but they didn't have like private money lenders. They had hard money lenders back then. They had you could do a conventional loan on a flip or something like that, but you had to use particular types of loans where you had to borrow more than the value of the house and stuff like that. But for me, I started basically with my own money. And I would do the flips all cash before I even got involved with financing. Small multifamily is something new that I've been doing. So I've been doing flipping for so long. Small multifamily makes sense. I can wrap my mind around it. I don't like to get into the really big things because that's like college level. And I like to stay in high school a little longer. I kind of stay in my lane. I kind of scale from there. We do small multifamily right now in Savannah and DFW. I am in one large deal in Decatur, Georgia. I'm a general partner there, 122 units. And I have some other properties. We have a property in Vegas. We have property in Houston, Fort Lauderdale. And we do hard money loans also in Pennsylvania. There's a builder up there that we hard money lend to. That's pretty much what we do right now. But as far as flipping and multifamily, I was talking with an investor the other day, and we got into a bit of a debate. This was about a week ago. That multifamily or doing multifamily is better than flipping, and you look at it differently. And I argued that is not the case. It's identical. It's the same principles involved. The only difference is the hold time. And a flip, you might hold it 90 days to 180 days, maybe up to a year. But multifamily, you might hold it many, many accounting periods, maybe 5, 10, 15 years or your entire life. But eventually there will be an entry and an exit point for everything. And I think I'm about to lose power on my computer. If I blank out on you, I'll be back as soon as I plug it in.
Okay, yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of how I look at real estate. I apply it like I'm valuing a company. If I'm valuing Microsoft, or if I'm valuing Apple computers or something like that, I take the same approach. And I see that most people in the real estate industry kind of value it the same. They use different terms. The terms are sometimes used incorrectly, I noticed a lot. But for the most part, the mechanics are the same. Give you an example, like cap rate. They use this word called cap rate, which I'm familiar with it in real estate, but it's technically a word that we use in valuation called price earnings ratio, which is basically the amount of money you make for the price you pay for something. The only thing they do in real estate is they invert it, put the denominator over top of the numerator, and you get a percentage instead of a whole number. Things like that I've noticed. So when I started underwriting deals, I had to learn the same finance language, but different words for it. They use different words for everything. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Okay. So it took me a minute to take what I knew in finance and apply it to multifamily underwriting. And it's been kind of fun. And I hear people all the time use things incorrectly. A big thing I have that I see a lot is syndicators. They're kind of young, and they'll post their numbers and they'll use an IRR, and I'll look at the IRR, and I'm always questioning how they determine their IRR, because the IRR is determined based on a lot of assumptions, and one syndicator's assumptions can be completely different than another's. And to give you an idea, basically what the IRR is, if you don't know what that is, it's the internal rate of return. That's how companies value an asset's performance over a period of time. And basically what they do is they determine the price they paid for it today, what's it worth today, and then what they will probably sell it for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, that cost. And the difference is the gain they'll make over X number of years. And the equipment or machine or asset or whatever it is, a property, house, apartment building, will produce income each year throughout that entire cycle. So most syndicators, what they do to keep it super easy, so just add up all those numbers, and then they'll take the number and just discount it back to today, or dollars today. But the proper way to do an IRR is to take each year's income, discount it back the number of years to the time you received it to today's dollars. So to give you an example, if I bought something for $100,000 today, and it's going to produce for me $10,000 each year for the next 10 years, this year, when I receive that $10,000, well, that's a 10% return. Next year, when I receive another $10,000, it took 2 years to receive that $10,000. So I have to discount that $10,000 back to dollars today. What's that 10,000 worth today? If I were to put it in something today, what would it grow to be $10,000 2 years from now? And then we have to factor out something called a discount rate, a rate at which you will discount it back to dollars today. So a lot of times syndicators just do the short method, just add up everything, including what they sell the price for, and discount the whole thing back to dollars today, even though they receive some of that money in a year from now, or 2 years, or 3 years, or 4 years. Each period has a different value on that money because you had to wait longer to get it. Like when you buy a bond for $1,000 that has a coupon of, say, 5%. So it's going to pay $50 a year. So each year you receive $50. So, but you had to wait a long time for the first $50, or the second $50, the third $50, and so on and so forth, until you get to the bond maturity date of, say, 10 years. It took you 10 years to get that $50. But that $50 ain't worth $50 today. That $50 10 years from now is worth a different amount today. And you have to figure out what it's worth today. Would it be worth $10 today, $15? So I see a lot of those discrepancies when they calculate their internal rate of return, when they're trying to sell you their pitch. Now, there's a lot of good syndicators out there. Don't get me wrong. They're not all like this. But I have seen a lot of young syndicators that, maybe they have a background in finance or maybe they don't, but they are clearly doing it incorrect. But basically, so I do try to educate people the proper way to value things. I notice a lot of people in this space. There's a lot of new people. I mean, there's more people in real estate now than I have ever seen. And I've been in this industry over 30 years. And the number of people that just because of the explosion of the internet, YouTube, and now you've got people that are in it because they just want to find something to do that will make money because their currency is sitting in a bank account, becoming nothing overnight. Given enough time, it'll be worthless. So they're finding other ways to make money. And you go to the internet, how can you make money? And you see someone who's selling to this, and just make money overnight, become a millionaire in 10 days, all this stuff. And people are just looking for ways to make money. And real estate has definitely attracted a lot of those people. They've landed in this space. And I see it. I mean, I'm up against competition. The other day, I got beat out on a flip offer by $5,000. The guy's offer was lower than mine, but I didn't get the deal because he said he could close before I could. And I could close in less than 3 weeks. But I've seen a lot of that. There's a lot of competition out there, a lot of newbies out there that I'm up against, and they're just willing to run the price up to whatever number they can so they can get their deal. And it's dangerous investing because I don't think they realize the actual value of a property or how to calculate one or how to comp one. It's risky business when you're just running up a price, just trying to get into a deal because you're new at it. And I'm up against that all the time. I've missed out on perfectly good deals, valuation right on the money. I knew what I should have bought for it. I knew what it's going to cost to rehab it. I knew my holding time. I knew what it should sell for. I got a range. And then some newbie will come in there and swoop it up for 10 grand or 15 grand above me, or make terms that are just unreasonable. So I see a lot of that in this space. But again, there's a lot of great operators out there too. There's a lot of smart people. There's a lot to be learned, but there's also a lot to be not listened to on the internet too. So I see a lot of it. It's like I have to spend an entire week cleaning up people's messes, things that I just know aren't true. But it's but my background is mainly finance, so I can talk about numbers all day long. But I have great flip stories too. I mean, I've got the Cujo house. I got the haunted flip. I've got the shakedown on Shady Street. I've got the chalk outline. I've got the WTF I used to call it. So
yeah, let's go with those. And also, just talk about the 5 things we were looking at, how you found the deals, how you raise the risk capital, the asset management.
Sure. For me, how I find deals, it's pretty consistent. I've always used real estate agents. I've met flippers, they'll use wholesalers, or I've met flippers that actually do the wholesaling themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a perfectly good strategy to do it. But for me, I've always used a real estate agent. I have a list of questions I always ask them. Basically, I want to know, do you work with investors? Because, real estate agents, there's 2 types. There's kinds that it can be a buyer's agent, and there's some that can be a selling agent. And some of them will tell you they can do both. And if they tell you that, that's not true. You're either really good at one or the other. And I actually have 2 different agents with my properties. I have one as my buying agent. They're very investor friendly. They know what I'm looking for and they go find them. I give them, these are the zip codes I'm looking in. These are the properties I'm looking for, and they go find them for me and they bring them to me. And usually the seller pays the commission, but when it's like a FSBO or something like that, or maybe he picks up something from a wholesaler, I'll pay the commission. I'll just work it into my numbers. And on the back end, when I sell it, I use a different real estate agent altogether, somebody who knows how to sell properties. But finding deals for me, I've always used real estate agents. I'm not a very good wholesaler, although I could talk to a seller very well. But I just don't do that. I don't have time to make 100 phone calls in a week looking for 1 or 2 people that are willing to sell their house to me at a discounted rate, or even on subject deal or with terms. But that's basically how I find my deals.
So how do you
And
find the realtors to work with? I mean, you said you had a list of questions, right?
a
So
lot
you
of times, well,
interview them?
questions I'll ask them are very basic. There's only a handful of them that I ask. One, how long you been a real estate agent? That's a big one for me. And more importantly, how long you been a real estate agent in that market? Because they could have been a real estate agent in another state, and they're just combining all their years as a real estate agent, but they know nothing about Dallas. They might have been an agent over in Georgia, and they just moved to Dallas, and now they're only been there 2 years. So how long have they been as a real estate agent in that market? And I always ask the question, it doesn't matter what the answer is, I just want to hear it, is, are you a buyer's agent or a seller's agent? And if they say both, I usually want to hang up the phone and just, you're not true, man. You're either really good at one or the other, because it's a different mindset. And a big question I always ask is, do you work with real estate, or do you work with investors? If they work with mostly buyers and sellers, emotional buyers and sellers, that's a different type of selling altogether. It's not, and a real estate agent that is looking for an investor, they know what I'm looking for. It's a numbers game. They know it's a numbers game. They're just looking for the numbers and the properties that I would buy. And they send me an email, say, hey, these are the ones that I found. And I'll decide if I want to do them or not.
So in
But,
terms of multifamily versus flipping, can you
mhm.
use a real estate agent for multifamily as well?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I recommend it. But now that's a little bit different. Multifamily is usually it's a different type of agent. The commercial agents, commercial real estate agents. Now, a lot of the really good ones, they don't mess around with the small stuff, but they'll mess maybe a little bit. So you're not going to get with like a Mark Millikamp, and you're not going to get with somebody like that and sell you like a like a 10-plex or something. You might find something high end in a very expensive area, like maybe something on West Palm Beach or maybe in Boca Raton or something like that. But for the most part, they handle the big stuff. So you literally, I call, believe it or not, I would call management companies, project or property management companies, and ask, hey, man, do you guys know any good real estate agents in the area that do commercial property, something up between 5 and 15 units, because that's about where I like to live. And they'll give me some referrals, and I'll call them. And I have similar questions. Some questions I'll ask them are, how long you've been doing it, same as I would a real estate agent that does residential. And I'll ask them questions like, do you also invest in multifamily? Do you have properties in the area like this one that I'm looking at? I'll ask them, because sometimes that's a big one, because they might have other properties that are in the area that is a conflict of interest. So I like to know that kind of stuff, but sometimes it works in your favor because they really know the area. And I asked the particular person, they have like a network, are they national chain? And because, the bigger guys are like that, or are they just that particular market that I'm looking at? And usually they are, and they'll give me their usual thing. And the problem is with commercial real estate agents is the first time you meet them, they don't trust you. Believe me, they are interviewing you just like you're interviewing them, because they do not want to waste their time with somebody who's just kicking tires. And so at first, they've heard it all before. And they've probably heard every spiel. Hey, I'm an investor. I'm out of town. I'm coming down. I'm telling you about the market. What do you got there? I'm looking for this, that, and the other thing. And they'll say, and they'll tell you right up front, hey, no, you put it in writing, make an offer. We'll call you back. It's just like that. So a lot of times you got to go down to their office and get to know them, bring them a box of donuts, man. It's anything you can do to just like get in front of them. I used to do that at the permit office all the time. When I had a really tough house I was trying to get through permits, I'd go straight down to the permit office and I'd go drop off a box of donuts and one of those boxes of coffee, put my cards out and a little note for the inspector. And remind them, this house on this drive, I need inspections. I need to pass so I can get to closing. But that kind of stuff works. I use that kind of stuff all the time. As a matter of fact, nowadays, and now my battery's running low. Give me a second. Let me go get my charger, and I'm going to plug in my computer real quick.
Yeah, no problem. So has anyone else here used real estate agents to find either flips or single family houses or multifamily houses? I mean, my cat wants to join the party.
Hey, everybody, I'm sorry, I was on another call while I was listening, but the kids walked in the house. I got some exciting news.
Oh, tell me.
Well, I haven't seen it in paper yet, but I just got a $4 million proof of funds to go pursue a couple of deals. So
That's exciting.
The good news is I haven't that's without selling anything. The bad news is I'd include all my wife's assets.
Oh.
So I'm not sure, being that we're in the middle of court and settlement and stuff like that, I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do, but whatever.
Yeah,
We
so
kind of decided we're getting along now.
oh wow. So did you tell us how you found the deal, Ed? Did you use a real estate agent or did you?
Well, these were listed, but they're kind of unusual, and they've gone through several iterations. One of the funds that I'm invested in actually walked through the place and made an offer, but it was rejected about 4 months ago. And so this deal I guess it's a partnership gone bad. And basically they decided to renovate the whole entire 48 units, and everything is in kind of a mishmash of completed state or not, anywhere from 20 to 80% done. I think there's 20% of the units are rented right now is all. So they're bleeding cash fast. And I don't know if contractors ran or they just really weren't able to get everything together, but it's in receivership. So we're going to get a judge to come in. I got a partner who specializes in rehab, and he's got 3 work teams. So we figure we could probably get this place up and running within about 3 months and cash flowing again. And once that's done, then we can stabilize and secure long-term funding for it. So.
Right. That's cool.
And there's another deal that
Well,
is way
yeah,
overpriced.
let's hold off on that one for a little bit so we
Okay.
can get back to Alan. But
Yeah.
thanks. That's
So
exciting. Good luck with
So
that.
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's first big deal, although I don't have it done yet. I got to win it. So, okay. Yeah,
all right.
thanks.
So Alan will tell us all about his flips and his stories and all the risks that you have to think about for your first property. So.
Oh, where was I before my computer
you were
almost, my
asking
computer
a lot
almost
of
died?
questions about real estate and agents and interviewing them, and they were interviewing you.
Once I get a real estate agent I like, I tend to stick with the same real estate agent. I don't like to use lots of different real estate agents. So once I find one that I like, I stick with them. But once I find them, good. I used the same real estate agent in Maryland for like 15 years. Brahman was her name. She found me every single deal I did, every deal I flipped. She knew exactly what I wanted. She would actually enter into a contract for me without even telling me. That's how well she knew what I wanted. That's how the relationship evolved over 15 years. It's almost like a brother-sister relationship. You get to know somebody that well. And Savannah, I ran into an agent by accident who turned out to also be a subcontractor. And he had been in the Savannah market for 30 years. He'd been a real estate agent for about that same amount of time, a little longer maybe. And he also owned a construction company who does rehabs. So I said, man, it's a one-stop shop and you can find the properties for me and rehab them for me. That was just a great find. And I do that right now in Savannah. But finding good real estate agents, it's just a matter of making phone calls. You got to call them. You're probably going to get a bunch of bad ones. But once you find one that, you know, hey, do you work with investors? That's the question. And if they say, oh yeah, we work with investors, and do you sell or do you buy? And if they say both, that's a red flag, because I'm telling you, they can't do both. They can do one or the other really very well. And you want someone to do it very well on the front end and the back end. So you want to, like I said, I have a different person do the back sell it than I have actually be my buyer's agent. And the buyer's agent is the most important, because they find you the deals. Because a little known fact about flipping or real estate in general is a lot of people say you don't make your money until you sell the property. And that's not true. You make your money when you buy it, because the property is going to sell for what it's going to sell for on the day that you sell it. I don't know what that price is going to be, because the future is just not known. But I do know if I get a good deal on it today, that is where the profit is made. I just have to wait to get it. In a flip, it's going to happen a lot sooner if you're a very good operator and flipper. But in multifamily, it's a longer wait. You might have to wait 5 or 7 years. If you're in a syndication, the syndicator is probably going to do a 5 or 7, sometimes even 10. I've seen 10-year syndications, but 7 seems to be the magic number, because that kind of works with the financing that they typically get. But as far as real estate agents, that's how I find my deals. But like I said, there's flippers out there. They do wholesale themselves. They deal directly with wholesalers. They don't even mess with real estate agents. And then there are some flippers that do direct with the seller. I mean, they go door knocking. I've met a few. I've actually partnered with a few of these people. They are very good at it. And I used to love sit down, listen to them, talk to them on the phone, and how to get them to sell this property to them. It was quite enlightening. Things I can't do. So a big thing about real estate, and I'm sure everyone's heard it, is it's a team sport, and everyone, you know, you're not good at everything. I'm not good at everything. There's certain things that I'm good at, but most things I'm not. So I find people that are good at them, and then I have them do them for me or with me, whatever the case may be. And but basically for me, that's how I find my deals. It's no magic there. Find a good agent, have them do the work for me, saves me a bunch of time. If I have to pay them, that's fine, because if I do it myself, it's probably going to cost me more hunting down deals myself. So it's better to pay an agent to do that for you.
And do you pay the buyer's agent, or do you just let them get commission?
I usually pay, because a lot of times they find off-market deals. They're not listed with an agent in order to get paid. So I'll pay them their 3 points, you know, buy a $200,000 home. It's in bad shape. So I'll pay the broker his $6,000 or her $6,000 commission on the front end. And just so, you know, it's got to be worth their while. But a lot of times also the seller has already got a listing agent, and they're going to pay my agent on the front end 3% to split the brokerage fee, or whatever it is, whatever co-op they're paying. It's different for how they might only have a 2.5 or a 3. It depends on what the listing agent got for a commission on their listing agreement. So if they're being paid that way, then I don't have to worry about it. But also I can offer a better price, because I don't have to pay the commission. So it's all a numbers game and everything. So but basically that's how I approach finding deals. I really don't have a magic formula. I don't have anything special. I could say, you know, press the red button, press the green button, press the blue button, and poof, you'll have a house. You get yourself a good agent, and they let them do the work for you and make sure that they're well paid.
So
Because
tell
a
us
good
a
agent-
story about your Kojo house, or your haunted house.
Cujo house.
How you found them. Yeah.
Well, Cujo house, I had gotten, this is back in 2005, 2006. It was just before we noticed there was a problem in the market. There was a house I got a lead on. Brahman, my agent, she said, hey, there's a house over in Capitol Heights. It's a 3.2. It's everything. It's right. Square footage is perfect. Looks like it's in bad shape. I said, perfect. I'll go take a look. I did have a partner at the time. He likes to remain unnamed, so I'll call him Carl. So, so Carl and I, we were partner on some flips back then. And he had a rule at night. We would never go into a house because the neighborhoods we did were D- at best. It's just the types of neighborhoods we did flips in. So so Carl, that's not a, that's so funny saying his name, Carl, but always say, if we're going to go look at a property at night in these neighborhoods, we always go together and we always carry. And if you know what I mean by carry, I'm pretty sure everyone knows what I mean by carry. So this particular night, I was on my way. I was still selling real estate at the time. I was working for a company called Lennar. And I was on my way back from the job site, and I thought I would swing by this property real quick and take a look at it. It was kind of late in the year, so it gets dark around 6 o'clock. It was already dark outside. And I pull up to the house, and I call my agent, say, in front of the house, does this thing got a lockbox on it? She says, yeah. And she gave me the code. So I go in this thing, totally breaking our rules. I know I'm in like one of the worst neighborhoods. It's like a really bad neighborhood. So the only good thing I did is I had my flashlight. So I open up the door, I'm looking around, and I have my agent on the phone. I'm talking to her, and I'm talking out loud. And I'm like, oh yeah, this place is a real dump, man. This is like the worst. This is right up my alley. I just see money all over the place. I'm great. This is great. Great find, Raman. Great find. She said, so you gonna when we put it on the contract? I said, absolutely. I can turn this in probably 4 months. And so I turned my flashlight and I looked down what was like a back hallway, and there was these 2 globe, like little orb globe things. Like I thought they were marbles at first, and it's like sitting on some kind of a weird end table. And I said, there's looks like there's diamonds in here too. She goes, what are you talking about? I said, there's 2 shiny objects. There was a dog bigger than me sitting at the end of the hallway, staring at me the whole time. And then I put my flashlight, I put, and then I could see the outline of the dog. At first, I thought it was a statue. And I said, you know, like one of those statues you'll see on, what was that? Wheel of Fortune, the Dalmatian statue. So I'm like, oh my, I said, hey, Brahman, there's like a statue dog in front of me. And then it growled. And it was like a very scary growl. And I said, oh, wait, it's not a statue. Brahman, I'm about to die. It's a real dog, and he's big and he's scary. And I think he's related to Cujo. She says, well, get out of the house. I said, I'm not going to run. This thing's going to attack me. So I start talking to the dog, like I'm trying to rationalize with this giant basset hound, whatever it is. And it gets up on its all fours, and you can hear the thump of its heavy feet on the crappy floor, and it's walking towards me. And I said, hi, dog. I mean, hi, dog. I didn't mean to disturb you. I'm just going to go over here. Like the dog could understand me. I'm literally having a childish conversation with this giant basset hound. And he probably had the barrel under his chin too, like those ones that save people in the Alps or whatever. But I don't know. But this dog was massive. And I remember keeping the flashlight on. I was walking backwards, and I walked into a piece of furniture, and I'm like, oh, hi, dog. No, I meant to do that. And I hear Brahman on the phone, and she's like, this is back in the old days. We didn't have smartphones back then. So it was like one of those old little flip phones. So you remember that technology? But so I backed all the way to the door, and the dog traced me all the way to the door, always with this low growl in its voice. And I said, okay, dog, I promise I will. I'll sell you the house. I remember saying, I'll sell you the house when it's done. I hear Brahman on the phone, and she's like, what are you talking about? No dog's going to buy a house from you. I said, shut up. I'm trying to survive here. So I did get out. I backed all the way out. And there was actually a screen door that I had leaned up against and pushed it open. And I mean, I jumped out and slammed it shut right behind me. I was like terrified, but I was trying to behave like a normal person, like, you know, trying to act all tough for this dog. This dog was ready to eat me. At least I thought, because then I saw his face, because it was one of those storm doors that had the glass pane in it. And the dog had his face up in the glass. He's like staring out at me. And I'm like, okay. So I call my partner, Carl. I said, hey, Carl, I might have almost died tonight. He said, well, you're still alive and I can hear you talking, so you didn't die. And I said, no, but I almost died because a dog almost ate me in this house I was looked at. He says, you're in a house right now? And I said, well, no, I'm not in it now, but I was. And he's like, what were you doing? It's dark. You know the rules, man. So I had to come down there and eat you myself. Anyway, that was the Cujo house. We did wind up getting that one. There was an eviction process on the dog. We actually had to call the dog down to come get the dog out. I don't know how the dog got in there. I really don't know. One of the back windows had a busted screen on it, so maybe he hopped in that way. We never could quite figure out how that dog got in there or how long he was actually in the property, but we did get him successfully evicted. We had all his belongings thrown out on the lawn, just like the sheriff would do. So it was that was probably one of the scariest flips that I hadn't started yet, but we did get that flip. We did flip it. We made about, what did we make on that one? 49,000 back then, which was a lot of money back in 2005. So that was a pretty good deal, that one.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about risk capital now, like the difference, you do it, how it's done for flips versus multifamily.
Well, risk capital is really a simple definition for risk capital is how much money you're willing to risk. That's really is all the money's being put at risk. You're going to put it into a deal, and how you assess risk is different from underwriter to underwriter. Some flippers, it's a higher risk because they don't got a lot of experience. Some syndicators, it's a high risk because they don't have a lot of experience. Their numbers might look great on paper, but if they don't execute that plan, that money is at higher risk than you actually know it is. In finance, there's something called there's a delta and a beta. And I'll explain the difference. Delta is basically how much money you're going to make off of this money you just invested. It's just called it like a delta. If you invest $10, you make $20, you make $10 out of it. That is a delta of $10. Like a beta, though, that's a little bit different. That is basically a risk indicator. And how it's calculated is, this is going to be a little complicated, but you basically take the assumption that a property will be worth this fluctuating price throughout time against the general market, the overall market, how much it'll fluctuate throughout time. For instance, like if I wanted to value Microsoft using a stock market again, if I wanted to use Microsoft and determine how risky Microsoft is, I would take the S&P 500, which is the general market, and see how the price moves over time. And then I would check the price to see how the price moves for Microsoft in that same period of time. Does it move more than the market? Does it move less than the market? And we would assign that company a beta. A beta of 1 basically meant the stock moved exactly with the stock market. I mean, if the market was up $10, it was up $10. The market was down $10, it was down $10. If it was a beta of 2, it moved twice as much as the market. So if the market was up $10, it was up $20. If the market was down $10, it was down $20. So beta is a number we calculate to determine how risky an asset is compared to the overall market. Now that's kind of hard to do with real estate because real estate doesn't have daily stock price movements. It might move, they might give you some monthly and you can do that monthly, but it's a little bit more difficult. But what I normally do, I literally do this, I'll look at the median price of homes over a given period of time, and I'll use monthly averages to see what the average market does and price fluctuations over a period of time. And then I'll look at the property. Now, some properties are harder to do than others because they might have only been sold once. They might have had just one owner. We have one sales price. The day they bought it, that's all we know. Some are a little older, some maybe from the 1980s or 1960s that might have had 4 or 5 owners. And I can see how the prices move through time. And I can actually assign a beta to that property, how much it moves in relation to the market. And if it's got a beta of 2, it's a very risky asset. It moves a lot. If the market goes up a couple of percentage points, it's going to go up more than that. So basically a negative beta, and gets kind of complicated, but not really. It moves. So like if you had a beta of negative 0.5, this is really complicated stuff. I really shouldn't get into this high level stuff. But basically the beta would determine how risky an asset is compared to the overall market. If it moves more than the market moves, it's a riskier asset. If it moves less, it's less risky. So if the market went up $10, but your property went up $5, and the market went down $10, but yours only went down $5, that's a less risky asset. If it moves more than the market, it's higher risk. And a lot of times, people use what's called a cap rate to determine the level of risk. Now, let me explain what cap rate is real quick, because a lot of people naturally assume it's a capitalization rate. It means at what rate will you recapitalize the money you invested. So if it's a 5 cap, 5%, you'll get 5% of your money back on average every year. So it would take you 20 years to get all your money back, if you want to think of it that way. So the cap rate would basically tell you the level of risk someone is willing to pay for something. And to give you an example, you have in front of you 2 assets, asset A, asset B. Asset A will pay you $10. Asset B will also pay you $10. Asset A will pay you $10 90% of the time. Asset B will pay you $10 70% of the time. So now you say to yourself, okay, I want asset A. Most people would. So they'll tend to buy asset A. And let's say there's a bunch of asset A's. There's a bunch of asset B's. I got to watch how I say that. It might come out like I'm using foul language. So as people gravitate towards the asset A because it's a better return, even though they pay the same, one is less riskier than the other. So they pay more for the one that has less risk because there's more buyers for it. More buyers means more demand, which pushes the price up. As the price rises, it still pays the same $10. It's not going to give you any more money because there's more demand for it. It just means, and to put this in real estate, you got 2 properties, both $100,000, they're both paying you $10,000 a year. The one on the left pays $10,000 consistently. Everyone wants that because it consistently pays $10,000. The one on the right pays $10,000 most of the time. So as people buy the one on asset number letter A, they drive the price up to where the risk is now equal to the other asset that pays most of the time. So now you drive the price up to say $150,000 because there's so much demand for this 10%, the $10,000 that's guaranteed to come your way. But now you're paying $150,000 for a $10,000 return versus the other asset, which is still $100,000 for a $10,000 return. So that's basically a cap 10. And the other one has now become a cap 7.5. I don't have a calculator. I can't do the math in my head. But basically that's how the cap rate determines the level of risk for something. How much money is somebody willing to pay for that stream of cash? And how risky do they think that is? So if I had a property in an A-class neighborhood, I mean swimming pools, high-end, there's Mercedes-Benz parked in every parking lot. That is a low-risk property. And then I go over here and there's police chalk outlines around the property and there's like drug deals going on down the street. That is a very high risk property. So that one's probably going to be a lower price, but it still generates, a property generates what it generates. That's not going to change unless you just run the property into the ground. So if the property's making $10,000, the risk is determined by the amount that the buyers are willing to pay for that property. And the fewer people that are willing to buy that property, the price comes down. Supply and demand, economics is always in play in everything. It doesn't get discounted. So what happens is, as the price goes down, it still produces the same amount of money, but now you're paying a lower price for it, so it returns a higher cap rate to you. So all a cap rate is a product of the buying public's perception of risk on that particular property. And the more they're willing to want something, the higher the price becomes because there's more people bidding for it. But again, the income doesn't change. It's just like the stock market. The price of a stock goes up and down all day long. Why? The company still makes the same amount of money on its last quarterly. That's what it made. So why is the price moving down, up and down? It's everyone's perception of what it's really worth on any given day based on fear and emotion and everything else. So that's what drives the markets and the cap rates. And I see that all the time. And a lot of people don't explain that to people in multifamily, that's exactly what that is. It's kind of it's a risk factor. How much money would I want if I'm going to give you this money? How much money in return do I want based on my perceived risk of that? If I can go out and get a bond that pays me 3%, you had better pay me at least that, because the bond is a guaranteed government. That's considered the safest bond. And in fact, in finance, the 10-year Treasury bond is used as a baseline to determine risk, because it's considered a riskless asset, because the government has never not paid on its bonds, has never missed a payment. And so all investors base risk on that baseline. So whatever the 10-year Treasury is paying you, you had better pay them at least that or better than that, because everything else has risk, because there's a chance you might not get your money. Matter of
So when
fact,
you're
I've got,
go ahead.
Finish
Your thought, and I'll ask my question.
Oh, no, I actually have a property in Houston. This is one of the few deals I was an LP in, limited partner, and got a letter from the general partner saying, hey, we're not paying rents. We're not going to be paying you anything. And it's been like that now for 6 months, because they basically, there's no guarantee in anything. Now, if I had bought a bond, I'd be getting my interest payment every month or every 6 months out. They're paid on those coupons, but the property, and there's no sign anytime soon that I'm going to get any return on that property, because they got to shore up their accounts, because that properties, they've got to refinance it in X years. And with the rates up, they're not going to be able to pull cash. As a matter of fact, they're going to be underwater. So they're not paying out any rents. They're using that rent money that they're not paying out to shore up their bank accounts so they can survive this. It's the right thing to do. I don't like it, because I've got, I got 100 grand in that deal, not making any money. So it's kind of annoying, but it's the right thing to do, because if they don't do that, come time when that loan is due, because it's 7 years, they got to refinance. And if that property does not appraise for what they paid for it, they're going to be in trouble, because they've got to refinance, because that loan has a timestamp on it. So a lot of that, there's a lot of things involved in this, but again, that's a risk factor that you have to factor into what you're willing to pay for something. How risky is that likely to happen? And, even the smartest guy in the room can't know what's going to happen. You can still get it wrong. My finance professor said something interesting. He's a finance guy out of New York State. And he said to me, he said, Alan, no matter how perfect your numbers are, how accurate, you had the right beta, you had the right growth rates, you had the right everything. All your numbers were perfect. Your valuation will be absolutely 100% wrong. And I said, Doc, man, how can I be wrong if everything I entered is right? He says, because the future's not known, man. There's tons of things that are going to happen. And you could have played that picture perfect on those numbers, and a war could break out. You could have some sort of ecological thing, there's all sorts of things that can go wrong that could just totally mess up the numbers. Technology, for God's sakes, is actually disrupting lots of things. So it's also helping some things, and it changes the dynamics of risk. So no matter how good your numbers are, there are gonna be those things that you just can't know are gonna happen.
Yeah, we had a property like that too, where our taxes just doubled. It's like, how is that possible?
Yeah, you can't. That's the other. That's a great example. That is a fantastic example. Government intervention is the mother of all disruptors. Anytime the government tries to get involved to do something or try to correct something, they usually wind up making things worse in an effort to try to do something good. And they really mess things up. I mean, I don't even have to get into the whole. I think everyone listening right now knows what's going on with money and debt and everything else. All a product of the Federal Reserve and their irresponsible behavior.
But anyway, in terms of putting down risk capital, so you make these evaluations between the delta and the beta, and then you decide, okay, I'm willing to take this risk or I'm not willing to take this risk. And so when you decide you are willing to take this risk, what are the kind of things that are involved in the risk capital that
Okay,
you
so
have to cover?
one thing, it depends on what I'm looking at. Now, if I'm looking at a fix and flip, I'm going to be comping it. That's different than doing an underwrite. Underwriting is you're doing evaluation over time of what it's going to be worth. So depending on what I'm looking at, now, if I'm looking at a fix and flip, the risk capital is basically there's always what's called information risk. The information I'm using, there's a risk to that. So I always factor that into my numbers. And a basic mathematical formula that I use to back into my determination is my agent, if they're a really good agent, and they usually are, they'll pull all the comps in the MLS. And I like to look at the comps that are within 60 days. I don't like to look anything more than that. And I like to look at the ones within a half a mile of the property that are on the same side of a major highway, because things change on the other side of a highway. Same school districts, things like that. Once I have a pretty good idea of a range of prices, I will grab all those comps, look at their square footage, and I'll adjust based on if this, you got a square footage a little bigger than mine, this one's a little smaller than mine, and I'll figure out what's the average cost per square footage. I'll apply that to the one I'm looking at, and I'll make adjustments. I might add an extra $10,000 to mine if that was a 2-bedroom versus mine. I'll subtract 10 grand if this one's a 4-bedroom and mine's a 3. So, or if maybe it has a finished basement. Now, a lot of properties around the US don't have finished basements. We had a lot of those in Maryland. That's a $15,000 ad right there if it's got a finished basement or a finished basement that can be finished. That's big. Like out in Dallas, don't even talk about basements. That is, it's not something they want. They don't even like anything above 1 story. Everything in Maryland, 2-story colonial with a basement, 3 stories, every house. I mean, that's just the way it is. So every market's going to be different. And the first thing I would tell you, you better know your market inside and out. You better know what your buyers are buying. And a good place to start is what's called the median price of your market. And that is basically the middle score. So every market has prices, homes that sell in different price points and they in a range. And you want the middle, not the average. You want the middle. An average is all of them added up divided by the number. The middle, if you've got 10 houses, or let's say 11 because it's easier, you got 11 houses, that 6th house, the one in the middle that has the middle price, that's your median score. That means that everybody from there down can afford what you're buying, what you're selling. So when I'm comping these houses and I come up with an end price, then I back into it. So I start with what I think I should sell it for. There's a risk there. And then I subtract out 30%. That's my money. So to give you an example, let's say I think the house should sell fixed up, brand new, beautiful for $200,000. I will subtract out 30%. So that's $60,000. So now I'm looking at what am I looking at? Say that's $140,000. And then I'll estimate my rehab costs. I'm looking at it, I'm saying, okay, this thing's going to need about 50,000. So now I'll subtract that another 50,000. And that brings me to 90,000. And I think, okay, this property should take me about 90 days. My holding costs on this will probably be about, worst case scenario, about $7,000. So I'll subtract that 7,000 out of the 90 and I get $83,000. That is the maximum I will pay for that property. And basically those numbers keep me within a certain measure of risk where even if the market turns on me, I should be okay. And if the numbers don't underwrite that way, sorry, I used the wrong, if the numbers don't comp that way, then I'm not going to do the deal. Because out of that 30%, might have to help the seller with closing because they can't close. I'm gonna have to pay a real estate agent to sell it. I may have some costs that I didn't anticipate. Those things are going to happen in a flip. I've done flips where I thought it was going to be a piece of cake. Man, I was wrong. I had what's called the sunken house one time. Beautiful house. It was in Capitol Heights, Maryland. Old Victorian style. Couldn't believe we got this thing for a song. Well, the foundation was jacked up. We actually had to lift the house up. It was $25,000 more than we had budgeted. It was, but again, I didn't do my due diligence. These were in the early days. This is back when Alan, this is back when you had dumb Alan. Now you got smart Alan. Smart Alan would have caught that. But back then, dumb Alan wouldn't have thought, he would, oh, that's a great deal. I mean, I'm getting it for like a song. All I got to do is drop maybe, 50, 60 grand into it. It's going to look gorgeous. But the foundation problem on that one was unreal. They actually had to bring in a machine that jacked up the center of the house because it was literally caving in from the middle on all sides. And they had to go in and put in support beams and lift the house back up. We started jokingly calling it the crooked house because the stairs were crooked, the cabinets were crooked. Everything about that house was crooked. Man, that was a disaster. That was probably one of my biggest lessons on get your houses inspected by a good inspector, somebody you like in that area who does that area very often. And I'll tell you, multifamily, and if you're doing fix and flips or if you're doing a multifamily deal, those are different inspectors. Like commercial inspectors are looking for different things than residential. And you definitely want to make sure you got the right inspector for that. But that was, that was Crooked House. I forgot to mention that one. But that one was followed right behind the house we called that one Shady Street Shakedown. And the reason we called it that is because the dang on inspectors wanted a bribe to get us through inspection. I'm like, are you kidding me in this day and age? And the inspector, this was in Cottage City, small zip code just outside of Washington, D.C. The guy wanted to get paid off to approve. I said, dude, everything's done on your list. It's perfect. He said, yeah, there's still problems with it. I said, what problems is, I couldn't believe he said this to me. Yeah, my pockets are kind of light. So now I was with Carl at the time. Carl's like, so how light are they? And I turned to him and said, dude, you're not negotiating with this guy. He said, the amount of time we're going to spend dealing with this is going to be far more. How much do you want? He said, $1,000 ought to do it, and I'll pass you today. And I said, son of a, got shaken down. We gave him a name. He was actually from Nigeria, and he was the inspector for that region. So we started calling him the Nigerian Nightmare because we said, we are never doing a property in that area again, as long as he's the inspector for that area. And we didn't go back to that zip code for a long time. And they had a new inspector. It was different back then, but it was probably my first experience with corruption within the government. Yes, it exists. It really does exist. It happens. Everyone wants to get fed. We could have fought it, but what would it have done? Our house would have sat there for months while it went through courts.
Yeah.
And the guy probably wouldn't have been fired anyway because they were all union. So what are you going to do? So you pay them off.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the differences between the residential inspections and the commercial inspections.
Well, commercial inspections they're looking at different things. They're looking at basically they're both looking at the same general things, like the wiring, the plumbing, things like that. They're looking at the structure of the property. But a commercial inspector is going to start looking for different electrical wattage, because a commercial property is going to require bigger boxes, a bigger electric panel. They're going to require a certain number of hot water heaters if the hot water heater isn't included in the actual unit. You might have like a boiler room where all your hot water heaters are down in some central location and they feed up to all the units. So that's a whole different inspection process. And there's different codes on how far apart they have to be sitting from each other versus a commercial property versus a residential property. For instance, like in a residential property, like GFCs, which are ground fault indicators, those are specific light or electrical outlets that have to be so many feet that, oh, I'm sorry, let me rephrase it. If there's so many, within so many feet of like a water source, like a sink or a toilet or a bathtub, not that you would have an outlet in a bathtub, but that's funny just to say that out loud. They have to have what's called a trip switched on it. And it's usually like a little red button in the middle. Sometimes they're blue. And that's a GFI. That's basically the system will trip itself off if water were to splash up into it. Just it's a self-contained like circuit breaker locally right there that handles that. On commercial
We have
properties, something.
Jess from Jess Electric who can confirm all this.
Oh yeah, yeah. Jess will. Oh yeah, Jess is here. Hey Jess.
Hey, what's up?
I think
Yeah,
that's Jess.
the rule is any 6 feet within 6 feet of water, it needs to be
Yeah.
ground fault protected.
There you go. See, I'm not an electrician. I'm a flipper. I just know this stuff secondhand, just talking to cool people like electricians. Some of my favorite people are electricians because, man, they really know what they're doing. And because I don't mess with electricity. We did a heavy up one time. I'm sorry, heavy up is when you're putting on you're basically connecting the city's power to your property, because the one we had on there was actually done so long ago. I didn't even think I think it was illegal to begin with. But that was, I didn't even want to, we had to call a specialist in for that, because that's not something every electrician will mess with. Most electricians they'll run the wires for you. They'll do your rough electric, and some they'll come in, they'll just do your finishing electric. It's just different. The different electricians that do different things, but this guy was strictly, he did heavy ups. That's all he did every day, all day. He was a pro at it. And so those are expensive, by the way. That cost us 10 grand. Didn't see that coming. Crooked House got me. The heavy up got me. The haunted house, the haunted flip was my favorite, because I didn't believe in ghosts until that flip. That's a good story. I'll save that for another one, Donna.
Oh, okay.
If
All
you
right,
call me
so-
back another time, I'll tell you about the haunted flip.
Okay, we can do that. So in terms of what money you lay out for risk capital, so it's for legal and accounting and for closing.
Again, depends on again, it depends on what I'm doing, fixing and flipping, or if I'm gonna buy and hold.
Okay,
For buy and hold, there's always going to be fixing and flipping is pretty much already done with the legal part. That's all done. It's just basically LLC is already set up. I already got my contracts in place. I already know what I'm doing. And agent handles everything else. The only attorney I'll see again is the one at the closing table. And they're not even attorneys, by the way, but an attorney will review their work. Attorneys will come into play if I'm doing like a multifamily. And certain states, you might have it depends on where your jurisdiction is. And you can't know, there's 22,000 cities in the United States. A lot of people don't know that. 22,000, all with different codes and regulations. So when you're going to do a multifamily property, and there's tenant laws, and there's landlord laws, and then there's BOCA codes on how you have to build an attorney is the best place to start for that. And I will pay top dollar for a good attorney, because if you chintz on that, I'm telling you right now, you are making a massive mistake. Don't chintz on a good attorney, because those guys, those gals, whomever the case may be, will keep you out of a lot of trouble. And they will make sure your stuff is right and you're to code. You're following the rules. And they're great advisors. They're expensive, but they're good advisors. I wouldn't recommend just having a chat with them over coffee, because they'll send you a bill one day. Yeah, remember that coffee we had for that lunch? Yeah, we were just chatting, man. What's this bill for $3 grand? But that never happened, but it'd be funny if it did. But
so
as
you
far
have
as
an LLC for each property? Is
every single property I own gets its own LLC. It does not matter if it's fix or flip or it's a buy and hold.
Okay.
All my properties are held. All right. How I structure it for risk management is I have a Wyoming LLC, which holds everything multifamily. Everything that I own multifamily, buy and hold, that I'm going to rent. I have a holding company in Wyoming that my attorney set up for me and then quit his job. So no one knows who owns it. So I have an enemy. No one knows that I own that company. So I'm not going to tell you the name of that company because I don't want anyone to know that I own it. Now that Wyoming LLC owns other LLCs in the state that I have a property. In Georgia, I have an LLC that owns multifamily there, but only one property. It's usually in the name. I usually use the address of the property because if you get so many, you start to forget which one does Blue Dog own again? How about Redbird? Is that the one? And just give it the address and like 1234 Gunstock Drive. That's the name of the LLC. Now for fixing and flipping, that's different. And I have a Nevada C corporation, and the C corporation owns all the LLCs that do the flips because that's the highest risk. That's active investing. We're at risk there. That's high risk. So if someone goes in there, subcontractor cuts his hand off, and the insurance company already covers so much, they could come after me. So I want a corporation to own the LLC and only one house can be flipped in an LLC at one time. I won't have two houses going in the same LLC. So if I want to do a second flip in the same market, I will go get another LLC. I will bite the bullet and spend the money to get another LLC rather than have them all those assets, because the benefit of an LLC is you're only limited to loss to what you put into it. So if I've got, 3-4 flips going in one LLC, and on property A, someone falls off a ladder, becomes paralyzed, and they're going to sue me because the actual, I don't know, maybe I didn't have a safety fence up, or maybe the silt fence was wrong or something like that, cause erosion and cause them slip and fall, whatever the case may be, that particular subcontractor could sue me, but they can only sue me for what's in the LLC. So if I have 4 flips going and he's going to sue me for several $1 million, he could get all 4 of those flips and take all of it. So each flip is self-contained and owned by my Nevada Corp. The Nevada Corp owns each LLC individually. And when it comes to banking, you only travel the money up and down the lines. For instance, LLC can never transfer money from LLC to LLC. You can transfer the money from the LLC up to your C Corp and from the C Corp down to another LLC, but never across. You never want to make that mistake, because the minute you do that, you break your shield of the word it's escaping me right now, but basically
Anonymity.
well, that's basically, they don't know who I am, but it's
Oh,
where you're-
piercing the corporate veil.
corporate veil.
Thank you. Piercing the
veil.
corporate veil. Thank you very much. I'm not an attorney. That's not my thing, but that's essentially it. So what a court will do is, if you're doing that, if you're transferring money between your LLCs, a court will say, oh, this is one big operation. So these aren't separate. So basically all of your assets are at risk at this point. So it's very good. It's very important to remember that when you're doing these sorts of things, this certain business, you separate each business entity with its own particular flip and its own bank account. And money must move on the lines of ownership, never across from LLC. Go up to the C Corp, and the C Corp can send money down to an LLC, and that's fine. And the reason you want your holding company in Wyoming to be, I can never say that word, anonymous, you don't want them to know, is because if you personally are sued, you're in a car wreck. I don't know, I hit some kid, I ran him over. I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. So the kid gets hurt. I'm being sued for $10 million. So the attorney is going to look me up and find out what I own. He's going to be looking for anything in my name. He's not going to find anything in my name, because my LLC in Wyoming, it's not documented that I own it. The only person that knows that I own it is me, because my attorney set it up. His name's on file. So when they call my attorney, they're going to say, hey, we're looking for the owner of this property. He says, yeah, I can't help you. I quit. I quit that job years ago. So my records show that I own it because it's updated, but you don't have to update your records in Wyoming. You don't have to do that in Delaware or Nevada. So those 3 states are very good if you want to use that strategy. So the whole purpose of the LLC is to protect you from your LLC and to protect the LLC from you, because you are the other part of that problem. So your liabilities could be taken from you. Court can rule it. Some states, like say in Washington State, if same scenario, I ran over some kid, the state will order me to give you my LLC, because they can do that. They have charge off orders. Wyoming, Delaware, and Nevada do not have that. So basically, I would only pay out some kind of liability like that if I took money out. The way around that is you take money out in the form of a loan. Because the first question I ask my attorney is, man, how am I going to eat, dude? How am I going to, if I can't take money out and they're just going to take it from me, the second I take it out, he says, give yourself a loan. Make it a business loan to yourself. You're not taking profits. So there's all sorts of ways to get around that. But that's just how I limit risk as much as possible. It's a little bit more expensive to structure things this way. But, you know, the reason you have insurance on your car, because you know it's
Yeah, it
inevitable. They
protects
say
you.
everybody's going to be in an accident at some point in their life. It's not avoidable. Everyone has been or will be in an accident. So you get insurance to protect against that, because you know it's going to happen. And eventually, you know, nobody's perfect, and I'm going to make a mistake, or someone's going to make a mistake on the property. A tenant's going to slip and fall. Maybe the lighting wasn't quite right and they didn't see the step, you know, there's all sorts of things. So you want to spend a little money for insurance. And that's why I structure things I do. I'm very careful about how I move money around between my entities. So money can only move from my holding company down to its LLCs and up. And same with my C Corp. Never, ever, the LLCs never, ever get monies transferred to it. It has to go through one of the central businesses first. That's how I handle risk there as far as that.
Yeah.
But as far as how much capital I put in, I have a rule that no more than 20% of my cash can be in any one deal. That's just a risk management rule that I follow. That is not something I'm recommending for everybody else, because everyone else is different. They all have different situations. Some people are just starting out. They don't have any cash yet. You know, some people have tons of money and they are very risk adverse and they don't like to have a lot of money in one deal. They might say no more than 5% of my money will be in this. But that's just a rule that I do. I'll do less than 20%, but I never exceed 20%. So if a property is going to take 20% of my money, then I don't want to be in that deal. It's too much risk for me, unless I can get more financing from other people, say the bank or maybe a private lender, hard money lender, which I use hard money lenders quite prominently, mainly because I can do a lot more flips with their money than I can with just my money. Because if I get to 3 or 4 flips all cash, I can't do any more flips. So a hard money lender allows me to leverage that, and I'll pay them a higher interest rate, but I'm only going to hold the money for 3 to 6 months. So it's a very small portion of my profits that I have to give away to the guy, versus say maybe partnering with someone where I have to get half of the profits away if I'm doing a 50-50 split with a JV deal, which is a joint venture. So that's just kind of how I approach my risk and how I determine how much money I'm going to put into a deal. When it comes to investing in other people's deal, I'll underwrite the deal like it was mine, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to vet the heck out of those syndicators. How long have they been doing it? What's their track record? Because there's going to be a time where I don't want to keep doing this forever, because it's a lot of work flipping houses. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of headaches. Subcontractors don't show up. Sometimes they abscond with your payment that you just paid them. They said they'd come back, but they didn't. There's all kinds of issues that you can deal with when you're actively running a business. And eventually I want to get to a point where I don't want to do that anymore. I just give it to some guy who's really good at it and just make me make money. Hey, you could take all my money, make me some money. And that's basically being a limited partner, because I really just want to travel the world. I don't want to be tied to a desk underwriting deals all day long and chasing down subcontractors and, dealing with lenders and agents and everything else. I want to go have a fun life. So eventually I'll get to an age where I don't want to keep doing this every day. And I'm going to just give my money to somebody else who's really good at it, a good syndicator. And how I would vet them is, I'm just going to ask them questions. How long you been doing this? What's your track record? How many deals? How many times have you asked for a capital call? And for those who don't know what that is, that's when they need more money than they thought they did. So they got to go back to the limited partners to say, hey, we need some more money. I believe you actually had Andre on last month. You told you about that story. The guy must have made 8 or 10 capital calls on her, just draining the poor girl dry. Just, there's only so much money that someone can give. And then, at some point you got to take accountability. You're just a bad operator. But you can avoid all that if you just upfront determine, you meet the people. Meet the people, meet them over coffee. Meet them. Are they married? Are they single? They're young. How long they've been doing it? There's all sorts of things that everyone's going to have to. They determine who they want to do business with. I meet all kinds of interesting people, and the one thing I want to know is, how long have you been doing this? That is my first question. How long have you been doing this? And they'll probably, I can tell you this. There's a very good book I read, How to Spot Liars. And one of the things that I learned from it was, if you ask somebody a question and they look up and to the left, they're creating a thought. But if they look up and to the right, they're trying to recall a memory. They look up to the left, they're basically coming up with a good lie. Look up to the right, about 10 years versus about 10 years. That's just basically I'm just being silly about that kind of stuff. But that is a real book, how to spot liars, or how to be a human lie detector. Actually played poker, so I'm quite good at that. So I used to play. I had a really good showdown one time in Vegas, and this guy just ate me alive. He read me like a book, man. It's like, he called me an ATM. I was so bad.
Wow.
But anyway, that's basically,
Right.
that's it.
Those are really good tips. So let's just move on to asset management, the difference between flip asset management and multifamily asset management.
Okay. So if I'm fixing and flipping, the first thing is project management. You're not really managing. You are, but you're not. You're just getting the project from its crappy condition into its beautiful condition so you can sell it on the market. Asset management, that's a little bit different. Of course, now you need someone to manage the asset, make sure the rents are collected on time, make sure the property manager is, doing their due diligence, the day-to-day stuff, making sure the bills are getting paid. That's somebody I'm going to want to be an accountant with a background and at least have an accounting degree, maybe has taken some accounting, maybe got an accounting certification, but maybe has a finance degree. Those types of people you want to be your asset manager. They're very good at managing money, watching the numbers. I'm an accountant. I'm in finance. That's kind of like what I do. On a fix and flip, you want someone, you're basically your best friend. If you got a good general contractor, they should manage the project for you. Unless it's in your backyard, I recommend everyone deal directly with the subcontractors just so you can learn what's actually going on. Learn the lingo of a subcontractor. Know that a 2x4 really isn't 2 inches by 4 inches. It's actually 1.5 by 3.5, stuff like this. Know that the fall of a drain pipe has to be 2 inches every 2 feet. Just make sure that the water drains correctly. Things like that. Just, how many outlets are required on the law per the codes of that county. Just knowing that kind of stuff makes you a better flipper, makes you a better rehabber, because you can also be a good rehabber if you're doing a property that you're going to, rent out, like maybe a 4-plex or a 5-plex or something small like that. The codes aren't too much different. So dealing directly with the subcontractors in your home market is probably a good idea just for the education. The subcontractors know quite a bit of stuff that you'll probably never know. Like Jess probably has forgotten more things than I'll ever know about electricity. And That's what I recommend. But if you're doing like long distance flips or long distance monk, you're going to have to get yourself a general contractor to manage the start to finish. And then your real estate agent takes over and sells it for you when that's all done. So asset management on that, in that case, you kind of technically are, but you're not handling, income. You're not handling the rent checks, and you're not paying, well, you technically are, depending on how long you hold the property. You might have some electric bills and some water bills, because at some point you have to have the water turned on so you can finish up the property. Same with the electricity. And you start getting bills. You got to make sure they get paid, but there's no money coming in at that point. So you have to manage your cost, your cash flow on a flip. You have to pay close attention to your time frame, because your time frame budget is as important as your money budget. Because every day you're spending about $100 a day on average on a flip. And the very start, it's not so much, but towards the end, when utilities are cut on, it gets a little higher. You got water, you got electricity, maybe you got gas in there, you got sewer if it's separate. And a lot of, like in Pompano, they start, even though you don't have trash yet, they're still charging you for trash pickup. And that was a 5 unit, so they're charging you a trash can for each unit. So it gets pretty expensive. So every day you delay a project, it's costing you money. You don't see it, but it is costing you money. So you're not writing a check for it, but you will write a check for it. These are deferred costs, but they are accruing. In accounting, we call that an accrued expense. Even though you don't see it, it is happening. And don't get me started on depreciation, how that's incorrectly used in real estate all the time. It drives me nuts.
No, we're not going to start
Oh
you
my
on that.
God.
Well, that's interesting about the time frame budget versus
Yeah,
the
you
money
got to
budget.
know your time frame budget, because it does cost money. Time is very expensive, because if you got a hard money loan, that interest is accruing. And you got utilities, and then there's some other costs you don't even think about. Like when you finish the property, you got to maintain. Might have to send a cleaner in there every so often. If it sits in the market for 60 days, you might have to cut the grass every so often, have a landscaper come in there. There's costs that are still accruing while the property's still not sold. And, property taxes, that's another one that's accruing. Your insurance on the property, you're still carrying insurance. And so every day, so time is of the essence on a flip. In order, if you're going to make money, you got to get that property started. You got to get that dumpster on the spot. You got to get that property gutted, every trash in the dumpster, and that dumpster pulled. And you need to get your rough trades in there right away. And I always start with plumbing first, and then I go HVAC, then I do electric. And then when I'm done my rough trades, it's usually pretty easy from there. But then you also have to address any structural issues too. You want to get those early. Anything structural with the foundation, or maybe there's a roof problem. You want to get those addressed early. I mean, sometimes you can tell where the problem is if you just look at the ceiling. I saw a wet spot on the ceiling one time. I knew exactly by the location that there was a problem with the soffits on the outside, or maybe there was leaves in the gutter. The water was just overflowing into the roof. It gets behind it, and it causes water damage. Because anytime you see water damage in the ceiling on the corner of a house, that's usually a sign that there's a problem with the gutters, because the water it's not draining down the downspout like it's supposed to. It's probably backing up because of leaves. It fills up, and then it overflows the back side of the gutter where the fascia is, and it gets down underneath and into the house, and it gets into your ceiling in between floors even. And you can spot those right away. And there's usually easy fixes. But if it's like right in the middle of the ceiling, you probably got a leak in your roof. So little things like that, when you're dealing with subcontractors, you learn things like that. I didn't know that stuff until my roofer told, oh no, that's not the roof, that's the gutter. That's how I learned that. I said, really? He said, yeah, this water backing up in the gutters probably leaves in the downspout, doesn't drain, it's water's pouring in, getting into the ceiling, and it's piling up right here along the edges of your ceiling, right here on the walls, on the exterior walls. And that's all that is. I could fix that in a day. And well, actually he said he could fix it in an hour. But if it's right in the middle, but if you saw the water in the middle of the house, that's probably coming from the roof. Maybe if you've got an AC unit in the attic, believe it or not, yes, I've seen AC units in the attic that just have clogged up condensation lines that just dump water into the, I've seen all sorts of things in a flip. I've seen rabid dogs. I've had dead bodies. Yes, I'll tell you about the dead body one time, the chalk outline. There was, oh, what did I have? The WTF house. That was actually, no, that was the chalk outline. We're really going to do this house? Yeah, it's a chalk outline of a body. It's crazy. But yeah, that's a lot of the stuff that we do. I think I might've got off on your topic, Don. I know you
Oh,
had me
no,
want to
that's
talk
all
about.
right. I mean, I just want to be respectful of people. So why don't we see if anyone who's remaining here has any questions for you?
Absolutely. Keep in mind, my background is finance. You want to know anything about finance? I got you.
Yeah, but no, there was a lot of gold here, Alan, and I thank you for that.
Yeah, there sure was. I put in there a beautiful mind. I mean, yeah, most of the finance stuff went right over my head. Like it was a lot to take in, but thank you. Wow, lots of golden nuggets there, man. You're lots of
Oh,
golden
no problem.
nuggets.
No problem.
Thank
Hey,
you.
anytime, usually in this kind of environment, when I'm trying to teach finance or accounting, I kind of like have to speak to a group. I'm horrible at it. One-on-one, I'm better because I know exactly where my listeners at as far as their knowledge levels. And I know exactly how to explain it to them. I'm quite a good teacher. The problem is when I'm talking to a group, I don't know where everyone's at. So I just sort of just talk broadly. Some people are more advanced than others, and I don't want people to go snore fest on me, but I don't want to lose people either because
No,
financing.
you were perfect. You were perfect.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
No problem. Anytime, Jess, give me a call. I'll be happy to go over accounting with you, and I'll discuss depreciation with you. It's the biggest scam ever.
Well, you'll
All
come
right.
back and talk about that. Anyway, Javier has
Oh,
a
yeah.
question.
Oh, yeah. So
Hey.
thank you so much, Donna and Alan, for the information. I really appreciate it. Hey,
Sure.
I have a quick question because I want to sell a house, a multi-unit, 2 units in Berlin. I
Mhm.
bought it all. It costed me, it was 66,000, but it was at the beginning of last year. And I have been repairing everything with what the rents have been giving me because I
Mhm.
bought it cash. And then I believe a friend of mine managing the property told me that the roof needs to be repaired. He thinks that might be the cheapest option, 10,000. Do you think that is worth to continue repairing it if I want to sell it for way more?
Well, if you're going to sell it, you're going to have to fix it, unless you just want to sell it at a discount to a flipper who will fix it and sell it for a profit. I will tell you that 10,000. How many square feet is the house?
Oh my God, great question. I owe you that. But let's say that it has like, oh my God, that's so unprofessional to say that. But okay, let's say that both houses are the same and they have a living room, 2 rooms, 1 restroom, 1 dining room, 1 kitchen. And this is like the area and then a patio around. Like I have like 3 rooms around and a parking lot like for 4 cars.
Okay. Is it 1 story or 2 stories?
Oh my God, great question. No, I have to go on top of that. Let's say that is 1 story.
1 story. All right. So if you want to figure out quick
Sorry,
back of the
2.
napkin,
Sorry
2
about that,
stories.
2.
Okay. All right. So quick back of the napkin way to figure out how much a roof should cost you. This won't work for every market, but it will work for most markets. Not all. It won't work in like LA, but it will work most red states like Texas, like anything in the Midwest. So basically you take your square footage, whatever that is. Let's say it's a 2,000 square foot home. It's 2 stories. So the roof is not as big as a 1-story, 2,000 square foot home. It's a smaller roof. So what you do is you take your square footage on a 2-story, divide that by 2. So you get it to 1/2. And then you figure you got to determine what kind of roof you have. Is it a pitch like this? Is it a flat roof? Do you know which kind it is?
Yes, it has both.
It has flat and, well, you could probably just do, I'll assume it's like most of it's like this, like so this side and this side, like a pitch, because most roofs have to have that to make the water run down to the gutters.
Uh-huh.
So what you could do at that point, so the math in this particular scenario would be take your square footage, divide it by 2 for 2 stories, multiply it by 2 for 2 peaks, and then take that number and divide it by 100. And that number should be the number of squares you need to buy, which is roofs are done in squares. So, and they charge you per 100 square feet. So if you divide that number that I just gave you by 100, it'll give you the total number of squares you need. On average, you're talking about $70 per square. So what you want to do, take your square footage. Since it's a 2-story, you're going to, if it was a 1-story, you wouldn't do anything. You would just divide by 2 because it's, or multiply by 2 because it's a pitched roof. So your square footage divided by 2 because you're 2 stories, and then take that number, multiply by 2 because you got a 2 pitched roof or 2 angles. And then you're going to take that and divide it by 100 and then multiply it by about 67. You could probably go to your Home Depot and determine that number yourself by just looking at the cost of shingles, your underlayment paper, and also your if you actually have to repair the plywood underneath that. But most of the time, it's just the paper and the shingles that you need. The other thing you need to know, and this is true of most every jurisdiction, you have to see if the home already has 2 layers of shingles on it, because most codes don't allow you to put a 3rd, which means you have to rip that off, and that is a cost. So you have to rip off the old shingles. Now, if there's only 1 layer, you can go right over top of that with new shingles. It's perfectly fine. Most jurisdictions allow you to do that. There might be some one-offs like, say, Alaska, some extreme weather areas that don't allow that, like that get a lot of snowfall, and they have to carry so much weight. And if you have too many layers of shingles up there, it will cause your roof to collapse in. So there are areas that don't allow that because of rules like that. And Alaska is a good one because they get so much snowfall. The roofs get pretty heavy with snow.
Oh,
And
like Berlin, New Hampshire, yeah, where I have
yes,
the house. The winters there are really
yeah. So
strong.
you got to take that into consideration when you're trying to figure out the cost of a roof. And that's about what it should cost you for a roof. And for labor, factor your actual roofer would charge anywhere between $500 and $600 a day. Again, that's market. That changes from market to market. So you're probably gonna, if you're gonna go to like San Francisco, that roofer is probably gonna charge you, $1,900 a day, versus say like Oklahoma City, the guy's gonna charge you $250 a day. So it's really important that you know. And sometimes just call roofers. Hey man, I got a roof. Give me a quote, and they'll tell you. One thing I don't do is I never go with the lowest guy. And the reason I don't go with the lowest guy, because the lowest guy is not getting paid enough to feed his family. He's just trying to get the deal because he needs a deal. And those guys do not show up to work when they're supposed to because they're not getting paid enough. It's just like your job. You go to work and your employer's not paying you enough. They're paying you $10 an hour, but you should be making 15, 20, 30, 40. You don't work as hard. You don't care. You don't even show up on time. Same true with subcontractors. Never go with the low guy, because that guy will not show up when he's supposed to. He'll be late all the time. He'll do half-assed work. You wind up having to call him back. It'll wind up costing you more. Always does. I kind of like to go with a happy medium with somebody I like. And they always say get 3 quotes, get 10, get 20, get as many as you can to get a really good idea of what it costs to replace that roof. And pick the guy you like the best. Don't go just on price. Never, ever go on price, because I can't tell how many times I thought the cheapest price was the best deal, and it cost me big time. Cost me way more. But that's just quick back of the napkin, just if you want to get an idea of what it's going to cost you to fix the roof. That's kind of like how I approach a flip. If I'm looking at a house, here's another rule. If you've got a roof, if it's an asphalt roof, that roof's good for about 50 years. So if you're buying a house that was built in 1980, that roof has never been changed, it's never been replaced, that roof probably needs to be replaced, because that roof is now over 50 years old. well, no, 40, it was over 40 years old. It's getting close, or it's going to need to be. So if you're going to rent it out, you better have in those numbers and a cost of money to replace that roof at some point, because it's going to have to happen. If you got a house built in 1980, that was 43 years ago, and the roof's good for 50 years, you got 7 years on average left on that roof. So plan on replacing it. And if it's even older, say like a 1960s house, that roof needs to be replaced, I can tell you. So when you're factoring in the cost to buy a home, and you're talking with the seller, you're talking with the agent, say, hey man, that roof ever been changed? No, what? It's 1962. That thing is like 70 years old, 60 years old. That thing needs to be replaced. That's a cost. It's going to cost me about 15 grand to change that. And that's a negotiating tool. Age of a house, the age of a home will affect things. I guarantee that furnace is going to be old as hell too. So is that probably the electrical box. Probably has old aluminum wire in it. Ask Jess, she'll tell you. That's all got to be ripped out and redone. So
Yeah, we're gonna have Jess come and talk one day here and tell us all the horror stories.
oh yeah, Jess she's the beast of electricity. She's shocking.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I got some horror stories, believe it. The number one thing that I might notice in a lot of these fix and flips and everything, that they do a lot of cosmetic work, but usually the electrical box is the last thing they do. They don't do it unless it's absolutely necessary, unless the city's requiring it. And usually they just connect wherever they can, tap into whatever circuits they can, and they just slam the cover on there and a few coats of paint. So it usually gets neglected.
It does. And the reason they wait to the last minute, because the minute that thing's connected, you are being charged, baby. The clock is ticking. There goes your holding cost. So a lot of flippers don't like that electricity hooked up until they absolutely have to have it, to make sure the lights are working and things like that, and do the finishing work, vacuum the property up, get all the crap out of it. But yeah, we don't like to hook that thing up unless we absolutely have to. And we'll get temp power before we get a full hookup. But yeah, that's a true statement. You are absolutely right. They just throw it together. However, and a lot of trades people aren't that skilled. A lot of people don't remember this, but back in the early 2000s, when there was a boom going on, I mean, it was so bad. There was no labor there was such demand for houses. There was no one to even frame a house, because the framing crews were busy for months. They had work for months. You couldn't get a framing crew. You couldn't get an electrician. You couldn't get a plumber. The housing market was a bigger housing boom that we saw recently. It was the biggest housing boom I've ever seen in my lifetime. And it ran from 2000 all the way up to about 2006 when it started to happen. And I was in the industry, and I was actually having a conversation with another real estate agent at the time. We were saying, I said, do you realize what's happening? He says, yeah, I know, man, these loans are going to start defaulting. I said, we're complicit with this. We're causing this. We're selling these homes, knowing full well these properties they're not going to be able to make these mortgage payments. He says, yeah, but not us. Who else? Someone else will just sell it to them. So we might as well get our money while we can. I said, yeah, I guess you make a good point. And sure as Shiola, market tanked within a year. And it actually started in 2006. A lot of people don't know that. The first bank failures happened in July of 2006. It wasn't until 2008 that the government actually said, we're in a recession. We were in one good 18 months before that, buddy. So it was already going downhill. So yeah, that's one thing that I do see coming in the next 18 months is real estate markets, just like the stock market, like any market, always corrects. Always. It is never not corrected. It never goes up in infinity. It's just always gravity. It's like gravity. Gravity will pull it right back down to reality. It's like it has done the past 3 recessions or 3 booms that I've seen. We just had a boom. I'm just waiting for the 3rd correction to happen with this boom, when it will happen. It always does. It never fails me how predictable the markets are. They always go up and they always come right back down. That's just the way I look at it.
All right.
Of course, I could do a whole thing on federal government's never mind. I'm not going to make this political.
Alan, I had a question for you. You were referring to.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, sir.
You were referring to roofs lasting for 50 years. Now, what if it says it's like a 30-year shingle? Is that the life expectancy of it?
That's the warranty on it. So what
Oh.
they do is like, if you're getting your shingles from like an Alco or something like that, they have a warranty on it, guaranteed for 30 years. So if your shingles fail in 30 years, they're going to come replace them. But they
Gotcha.
really last 50 years
Hmm.
on average. Like shingle roofs, like maybe like a cedar, that's maybe more like a 20-year roof or something like that. So
Mhm.
different roofs last different lengths of time. I've seen metal roofs. I've seen ceramic roofs. They last a long time. They can get up to 100 years on ceramic roof, but they come off very easily. So there's a lot of maintenance to ceramic roofs. You see those in the Southwest a lot. So, I mean, I don't have experience with every type of roof, but I do know asphalt because that's prominent in the state of Maryland. Every house
Yeah,
has an asphalt
ours
roof.
is asphalt too.
Yeah. So usually, and they could be the architectural shingles or they could be the regular square shingles.
Mhm.
And the architectural shingles have a cut to them. It kind of makes it look like a pattern on your roof.
Yeah.
Gives it kind of a more of a cool look, if you will, make your house look more expensive than it is. I actually prefer architectural shingles.
Nicer. I'm gonna stop the recording right now.